Thank you. Okay, hello everybody. Thank you very much for joining us on this call. It's a great pleasure to be introducing this. My name is Robert Hopkin. I'm a cluster manager for the Birmingham University Railway Innovation Cluster, the BRIC, and we are one of several European clusters. More about that in a moment. And as you can see, there's a cluster map up in front of us, 18 railway clusters covering 17 countries. And we are just here in the middle here. We're one of three British clusters or United Kingdom clusters, which is a small island off the northwest coast of Europe. But let's not worry about Europe because we as a railway cluster community, we are naturally collaborative and we have been for over 10 years. So we've been an entity since 2010. We were informally before that, and so we have been working with each other for the last 15 years or so. And as you can see, we represent over 3,500 organizations, of which 2,300, which is a minimum figure, are SMEs. And that's what we're here to do. Next slide, please. And what we do is we're trying to raise the awareness of clustering and how we can work together to make supply chains more resilient, but also how we can introduce more innovation into the railway supply chains. So how we do that also is we provide support for small and medium-sized enterprises. And right at the moment, my colleagues and myself are going through the judging process for the annual ERCI Innovation Award. And more about that later on in the year. And the actual award will be, awards plural, sorry, will be given out during Intertrans. We also have some task forces, and one in particular on cybersecurity and data management, one on the multimodal and logistics, one on green and sustainable mobility, and one on human factors. And there will be more as the future demands are met by the ERCI competencies. In particular, any one of these task forces is supported by a number of our clusters across Europe. So you can easily have 5 or 6 or 7, sometimes 10 clusters all working together on a specific theme. And along with that, we have bilateral workshops and webinars. And this is but one of those webinars. We have a premium content, and that's managed by Lutz from the Berlin Partner Cluster. And I'm very grateful to him for all his work today and getting us all in the right place on the Ethernet. So next slide, please. And if you want to find out more about us, then you can look at some of these links. So you can find us on the web at urlclusters.com. We are on X, and we're also on LinkedIn. And then nowadays it seems old-fashioned to use emails, but yes, we have that email address there at contact@urlclusters.com. And the important thing is that we are now a legal entity, have been for a couple of years. So we're not just a combine of like-minded individuals. We are very much a legal entity, very much looking to do business with other clusters, either within the continent of Europe, but more and more looking towards the outside and looking to other continents for opportunities for innovation, for supply chain development, etc. Next slide, please. So one of the things I'd like to do right now is just say a few thank yous. And just before I go on to talk about Karen and give you a little introduction about Karen, I would just like to say a big thank you to Lutz once again for running this webinar for us. And I would also like to thank my colleagues in the Rail S cluster in Saxony, in particular Rico, Aisa, and Dirk, all of whom have been working with my colleague Nagas, who's with me today, to make sure I don't go wrong. And we are, we've been working together on this output, which is for one of our European projects. This one is called S-Access, which is all about SME access to markets outside of the European continent. So now on to our guest of honour, Karen Carrière, Assistant Vice President of Technical Services for MXV Rail. And Karen began her career in North American railroad industry over 30 years ago. She is currently the AVP, Assistant Vice President of Technical Services at MXV Rail. In this role, she has oversight of the AAR, and AAR stands for the American, the Association of American Railroads, technical committees, and the auditing agencies that develop, maintain, and enforce North American railroad interchange rules. Also, the mechanical standards and also the component specifications. Right. Now, before I say, Karen, the floor is yours, I'd just like to remind everyone, please use the chat function for your questions, and that will help us ask any questions towards the end of the presentation. So, without further ado, thank you again, Karen, for making time for us. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, I'm really delighted to be here with everybody today. I am located in Canada, so we won't have time to poll the group and let me understand where everybody is from, but I'm just getting my screen up here, sharing, making sure that you can see the presentation. And then I will go ahead and get started. But it is great to be here today. I know you're in a variety of time zones, and I hope I'm not keeping anybody from getting in their car and heading home or running to the train. We'll go through this presentation today, and we're really happy to be here representing, the AAR, the Association of American Railroads, and to talk about some of the ways that there's opportunity for international suppliers to work within the AAR North American railroading system. I'm assuming everyone can see my slide. If not, I would hope someone will come on and just give me a quick buzz. Okay, very good. All right, so thank you again, Robert and the group, for really reaching out and inviting us to share some of what we do at MXV, and of course give some explanation as to how the AAR works with respect to rules, standards, and the approval process. I do invite you to include all of your questions in the chat, and I believe we're going to have a session at the end for perhaps additional questions, and I look forward to answering all of those. And I think at the end, we can certainly make sure that you have my contact information if there's any additional questions from anyone. So MXV Rail, I'm going to start very quickly by explaining why we're talking about the AAR, and yet it shows that I am with MXV Rail. MXV Rail, for any of you engineering geeks out there, which we are a whole slew of engineers over here at MXV, is really the equation for mass times velocity. And that, of course, is the equation for momentum. And that's how we see ourselves. We're always trying to move the North American Railway forward through our capabilities of testing and providing services, consulting, and also managing some of the AAR standards and rules. So we value our values are living by the rules of momentum, having insight, working as a team with rigor and purpose. And of course, today, I think you talked about collaboration amongst your clusters, and we strive to do that as well, collaborating to look for ways that we can bring innovation and solutions to North American rail. And it sounds like there's some opportunity perhaps with those that are participating on this call today. So again, just a real quick overview. MXV has approximately 300 full-time employees. We're operating a small railroad, largely used for tests in the Pueblo, Colorado area. We have 100 researchers with varying degrees, including those with doctorates. And in this position that we find ourselves in, we are the leading end-to-end provider for supporting the industry with technology adoption. And ultimately that results in benefits for our end customers. And our end customers, of course, are also our owners to a certain extent, and I'll share that with you in a minute. So we can consult on anything from computer modeling to doing off-site data collection and performing on-track testing for you. At MXV, as Robert mentioned, we support the AAR Technical Committees. Not all of them, and I'll explain that a little bit as well, but we are owned and operated essentially. Well, we're independently owned, but we are owned by the North American railroad industries. We're owned by the AAR. So our full members and our owners are the 6 Class 1 railroads and a small group of other conglomerates. We have some short lines. We have the Genesee and Wyoming, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with their operations around the world, RJ Corman, Metrorail, and Amtrak, who is also a member of that. Amtrak is the US passenger service. So we are independently operated. We service all of these folks, but the AAR is also our owner. So you will see MXV Rail, and you will see that it is a wholly owned subsidiary of the AAR. And how we got here, in 1934, the AAR was formed. So again, the Association of American Railroads was formed in 1934. There was some operations going on with respect to interchange prior to that, but it was formally put together in 34. In 1982, the AAR assumed care, custody, and control of the US Federal Railroad Administration's test facility called TTC, Transportation Technology Center in Pueblo, Colorado. And for 40 years, MXV Rail was formerly known as TTCI. So TTCI incorporated as a subsidiary of the AAR in 1998. And in 2001, we rebranded ourselves as MXV Rail. We were no longer going to be on that site, the FRA site, and we felt it was time to differentiate ourselves from the site and come up with our new brand and move forward with that momentum I was talking about. And in 2022, we opened our new multi-campus research facility and our testing labs in Pueblo, Colorado. And I mentioned that as part of MXV Rail's organization, we have technical services, AAR Technical Services. That's the group in which I lead. That group is made up of technical standards, including our committee management that Robert talked about, the mechanical inspection department, which is a group of mechanical inspectors that go around and ensure adherence to the AAR rules and standards. The Bureau of Explosives, likewise an auditing agency, specifically focused on the tank car requirements and certification. Damage prevention and loading, which creates all of the loading rules and guides for the industry, as well as publications and of the rules and standards. So we are in charge of providing the editing services and the publication and the fulfillment of the standards. And we're going to focus today a lot on the AAR rules and standards so that we can understand how that works in the approval process. And the critical part of that, for any of you who are interested in getting into this market, is being able to access the standards and understand what you need to do to meet the approval requirements. So why do we have these rules and standards? Excuse me, I'm just gonna move something here. It's because we operate as interchange in North America. We have railroads continuously interchanging with each other. There's over 1.7 million pieces of rolling stock in North America. And in order to operate from one line to another, they must all meet those interchange rules. So in our case, although we usually like to call them cars, today we'll call them wagons in honor of our audience, as I believe that's the term that's a little more common outside of North America. So a freight car or a wagon can start its trip up in the northwest part of the continent in Vancouver, BC, and it can end up a couple of days later in Jacksonville, Florida. You can imagine some of the complexities that occur with that too. The distance and the climate that those trains and the cars are going through, and the things that they have to sustain in order to travel that far across so many networks. So we cover 2 countries, of course, well, really 3 now, because it's also includes some operations down into Mexico. It would have to cover at least 2 railroads, obviously, to get that far. The entire movement would be documented by one of our sister companies, which is RailLink, also a wholly owned subsidiary of the AAR. And RailLink does the data capture and the tracking and the sharing of data between the railroads. All of the locomotives and freight cars are equipped with a passive tag called an AEI tag, an automatic equipment identification, and that allows us to see where all of those assets are at any given time, more or less. There we go. So again, we talked about who our owners are, but what really happens with interchange is the point here. It's those 6 major railroads. It's 22 regional railroads, approximately 550 small short lines or small operation railroads. There's private car owners and lessors involved. There's shipper owners. There's contract repair facilities that work within the AAR interchange. And again, all servicing and supporting the over 1.7 million freight cars or wagons that operate to provide quality and safe and reliable services to North American rail. And we all, I think, understand how critical railway is for the economies out there, and perhaps in particularly in North America with our strong interchange program. So a key part of this is talking about the rules and standards. And there's 2 different types of rules and standards that make this up. There's rules, there's AAR rules, and then there's the Manual of Standards and Recommended Practices. So the main purpose is to ensure that interoperability. These standards in the MSRPs allow for us to ensure that we have compatibility. So some of it is going to be about form, fit, and function. Some of it's going to be about performance. But in order to operate within North America interchange, you must meet all of the AAR rules and manuals of standards and recommended practices. Now, I would say largely in your case, while the rules will apply to a certain degree for international suppliers into our industry, the key is really going to be looking at the MSRPs. And I'll show you shortly how you can access those MSRPs. One of the ways is to access the library that you just saw a display of. Each of the sections are separated by their subject matter and by the committees that govern them. So we also have separate books. In this case, we're showing the specification for tank cars, which is section C3, recently published, and a lot of activity there. Everybody's often interested in providing equipment to tank cars. We also have a separate section for wheel and axle manual. A lot going on here in G2 because this has to do with bearing reconditioning and bearing performance, very important to our railroads, particularly of late. We also have MSRP J. That is our quality assurance program MSRP, and you'd be able to find that either within the library or separately, and we'll dive into that a little bit more as we move along. I mentioned that there was rules as well. There's 2 books that govern the rules, the field manual and the office manual. They dictate what constitutes a repairable condition for cars that are operating in interchange. They indicate what correct and proper repairs should be with respect to replacing components. They also identify the proper materials to be used and or techniques that should be deployed for the repair. And the office manual covers our price master, which provides a mechanism for payment, essentially, to exchange work amongst each other with a common pricing structure so that a repairing organization can recover the cost of the repair that they performed on a car, on their track, or in their shop in order for it to continue to meet AAR standards. Both of the, or all of these, the MSRPs and the 2 rule books, are developed and maintained by the technical committees that are governed by the AAR. We'll talk a little bit about these committees and how they all work together. Overall, everything is overseen by the Safety and Operations Management Committee. That group at the AAR, it's a committee managed at the AAR in Washington, and it's really made up of very high level chief operating officers, senior vice presidents of railroad. It's senior officials of the railroads that oversee the mechanical committees that would have individuals like chief operating officers and chief mechanical officers as well that would sit on that committee, and that oversight's on the mechanical side to the various technical committees that are more focused on specific components or specific systems that might be used in interchange. What you're seeing here is a layout of how these committees fall out within the AAR structure. The colored boxes, the Equipment Engineering Committee, Brake Systems Committee, Coupling Systems and Truck Castings, Specialty Equipped Freight Cars, that would include things like auto racks, and wheel axle and lubrication. We refer to that always as wobble. It's fairly clear what these are governing: the brake systems, the castings that go into the systems under the car and the underframe, and wheels and bearings. All of those 4 committees are overseen by the Equipment Engineering Committee, who has governance over really the entire car design and the car performance. Again, sorry, I think I might have missed it, but what's color-coded here, the filled-in colored committees are managed by MXV Rail. These are all of the committees that we support with a committee manager that's an MXV Rail employee, but at the same time, they are managing the committee that has volunteers from the railroad. Each Class 1 railroad has a member that sits on the committee and is a voting member, and they are actively the ones that are making the decisions relative to the requirements for North American interchange, again, with the goal of keeping us safe, reliable, and efficient. We also oversee the Damage Prevention and Freight Claims Committee, the Intermodal Committee that's looking largely at, well, the intermodal cars, but in some cases also the containers and the interface between the car and the containers. The open top loading rules, I mentioned that DPLS covers loading rules and loading patterns for both open and closed car in the industry. And then we have the Quality Assurance Committee. And the Quality Assurance is the one that develops the standard for the facility certification for the Quality Assurance program. The boxes that are outlined in red are areas where MXV provides support. So we have an economist on staff that provides support to all of these committees on the freight car side. Before we initiate a new rule or a new specification to the industry, with the exception of something that has to be deployed with the primary purpose of a safety issue, we always go through a cost-benefit analysis. So the economist is critical in helping us put together the numbers, making sure that the things that the technical committees want to do is something that the industry can actually handle from a cost benefit and a cost over 5 years, so that we aren't really crippling our industry. Of course, again, the thing that separates that is making sure that anything to do with safety is primary. So we also support the asset health strategy and the equipment health monitoring. These are committees that look at the whole system as a whole. They're committees that are looking at some of the wayside detection and the rules for truck hunting or hot wheel detection. So we provide support through our scientists and through some of our other committee managers to those committees. And then on the tank car side, also a separate committee that's reporting up to the AAR, but we have governance over the quality assurance program for facilities for the tank car committee. The product approvals are governed by the individual technical committees that I talked about. The tank car committee has a part of that, and the quality assurance committee in order to meet the facility approvals as well. But each of these committees has oversight for the standards over which they govern. We'll talk a little bit about what that oversight really means and how technical approval is looked at by each of the committees. So technical approval overall is the design approval, product approval, and facility approval as deemed required by each of the governing committees. Talk a little bit more about this in detail and what that really means in practical terms for you wanting to perhaps bring a solution to market. But these definitions, these three elements of technical approval are, basically as they sound. The design approval is where the technical committee has approval over the engineering documentation, any analysis and physical testing requirements for a product, such as fatigue and mechanical properties, microstructural, dimensional, and gauging. Those would all be laid out in the MSRP for the product or component that you might be looking to provide. As an example, the EEC holds the standards for freight car design. So they have a section on, I'm trying to think of a good example, on boxcar doors, for example. So they would lay out any of the design approvals that are required to bring a boxcar door to the market. Product approval, they would also determine how they wanted that product monitored and the continued evaluation of a design. After they get the design approval, then they want to look at how that is performing. So that could mean field trials, service trials, conditional approval allotments where you are regulated to a certain allotment that can be supplied to the industry before you're required to report back to the committees on your progress and any issues that are found, and then they evaluate if you continue further in the process. And then facility approval. Now, not every component or every standard that the committees have governance over requires facility approval. But if you do require facility approval, then you have to have the appropriate QA certification and then technical inspection and technical certification by the governing committee, the governing technical committee. So the approval process, there's really about 9 key steps to the approval process. And full AAR approval is only available for products that are intended to be sold in North America and also intended to be used in interchange service. So it's possible that there are products that are used and operated in North America, say in a captive service related to industry where there might be a mining company. Might be, there is one up in Northern Canada. They may follow AAR rules, but if there's a specific product sold just to support that operation, then the AAR approvals do not apply. And when I say that it's really AAR approval is reserved for products and components that are intended for North American interchange use, it really just means that we won't give approval unless you can show that a product is intended to be developed for use in North American interchange. So the very first step is to determine, do you meet that criteria? And is the component that you're coming to the AAR with intended to be sold for North American interchange? And we ask various questions to try to determine that. I mean, of course, if it's something that's already approved for interchange and you're trying to enter a market, generally a lot of that sort of evaluation is already done because the product's already out there and maybe you're a new supplier of the component. But we would also ask that we understand that there is an interest from someone in North American rail. And typically we look to the class ones to perhaps sign a letter of intent with a company. But the very first step before moving on to the committee approvals is to determine, do you meet that criteria? Do you meet that threshold? If you do not, if you have a product or a system or something that you're coming up with that at the moment is not intended for North American service, but you have customers or someone that you're supplying to or a market that you're interested in that values the AAR standards, then you can consider using our QA 5000 program that's intended to kind of fill that gap. And I'll talk about that a little bit more as we move along. Gotta check how I'm doing for time here. Once you determine that you meet that standard of being sold to the AAR market, then the next step is to review the AAR publications and determine where your product or your idea falls, under which committee there's going to be governance. You can also work with the committee manager if you have questions. You can send questions to me and I can make sure that the appropriate committee manager is engaged. And then of course, once that's understood as to what needs to be done, you would go through the process of meeting the requirements of the design approval, if there is design approval. And for most products, that is required. So if there's a requirement for design approval, you would submit your report to the committee. And then if that was accepted, you would go on to the conducting the testing that's required and report that back out to the committee. We would then see a physical technical inspection of the facility and or a quality assurance inspection. Any product that's going to have a specification tied to it generally requires that you have M1003. Not every facility has a technical inspection requirement or technical certification for a facility tied to it. Again, it really just depends on the standards that are written and the specifications, and you have to look through those and determine what those requirements are, work with the governing technical committee to determine how you can meet them. Then you would move into the conditional approval process once you have all of your certifications that might be required in place. And that conditional approval process is what I referred to earlier as product approval. So that may or may not include certain field testing requirements and reporting back to the technical committees. And then there would be final committee approval based on any feedback from what's happened in the field, based on any feedback potentially from any of the folks that have been using and purchasing or testing out the component or the product that you're bringing to the market. And then if all goes well, you have what we call unlimited approval or unconditional approval after that. So again, how do we navigate through these steps? Really, the first step is to access the publications. So once you've determined if you meet the threshold of requiring AAR approval or seeking AAR approval because you've got something that's going to operate in North American interchange, then you would want to go and visit the AAR publications. And this link will take you there. It'll take you to a storefront. It'll show you all the publications that are available. There's a couple of key items that, well, first of all, let me back up a little bit. All of the rules and standards come at a fee. They can be purchased either as a library or as individual components, but they come as a fee. But in order to help facilitate the process of people understanding how to navigate this system, we offer the table of contents at no charge, as well as the administrative standards supplement. These two items are available to you so that you can start to investigate what you need to complete your potential application for approval. So the table of contents will show you which sections cover which subjects. Now that in itself might not be quite enough to get you to exactly where you need to be, but it also gives you the generic contact information for each of the committees. Again, tech standards at AAR.com, this is the one that kind of oversees all of these different committees. This would come to me and a couple of other folks, and we could get you aligned with the right committee manager if there was any question. But you can access any one of these generic emails for questions if you are, doing something that's got to do with wheels, axles, or bearings, and that's the area you need to be in, but you have a few questions. You would then connect with Wobble at AAR.com, and that would take you to Daniel Carter, who is the technical committee manager. Let's see, there we are. There's also information on how to use the book and what is in that table of contents to help step you along the way. It defines, why some things are covered with, named with an M. Those are specifications. The RPs are recommended practices, and an S is when it's a standard. So it helps you to just understand how the book is laid out. And it'll show you that there's a numeric index, an alphabetical index, and then by section numbers, it'll give you all of the contents. But really, if you're trying to start this process for the first time, you probably want to head to the subject index, look for something in a description for the subject that meets or describes the component or the area in which you're trying to bring a service to the industry. And that will help you find which standard you need to be in, or which standard you need rather, and which book or section you would need to obtain in order to get the standards and specifications that you need to apply for that approval. So again, we talked about this slide a little bit where we said there's the three components to approvals, the design approval. So assuming you've navigated your way through the MSRPs, you've found the correct technical specifications and standards, and you've read through them, you would then go with your request for a design approval to the technical committee. You would provide any test results and reporting that would be required as part of that approval, and we would submit that to the committee manager. The product approval, if required, would include things like the field service trials and tracking and monitoring of the performance out in the field. And then if required, and again, this should be clear in the MSRP or the standard that you're looking at, is whether or not you need facility approval. Some of the technical requirements include facility approval. for castings as an example, they all require technical inspections at the facility. And then there's the QA audit, or the QA system certification. That's governed by the Quality Assurance Committee, is part of Section J in the MSRPs, or rather part of, it is Section J in the MSRPs, and includes the Quality Assurance Standard M1003. So that standard and that certification, in combination with any technical certifications that might be required, is what you would apply for. An audit would be set up by one of our auditing agencies, and then you would be determined as to whether or not you're meeting the requirements for facility certification based on the component that you're trying to produce. I hope that's clear. It always seems clear to me, but sometimes when I try to describe it, it might get a little muddy. So if there's questions surrounding that, please feel free to ask. So just an example now of what an MSRP looks like. This comes from Section C1, I believe it is. Nope, Section D, my apologies. And it's really just describing the truck performance for rail cars. So this is obviously a very long specification, but you can see that it's giving criteria for the testing requirements. It's showing what kind of performance needs to be met. And as you would read through this particular specification, M976 for trucks, you would be able to determine what you need to do in order to meet the design approval application. The administrative standards supplement, I mentioned this earlier. This is the supplement that's one of the freely accessible parts of the MSRP. This will help you to navigate through the application process. This particular standard here is SO60. If you were to come to market with a component that has no specification for either the materials that are used or the performance, then you could turn to SO60, and it will guide you through how to approach a committee and how to make an application for something that might not be clearly defined yet in our MSRPs. Of course, we don't want to stifle progress and new technologies. We want to be able to provide a mechanism for companies to come to the industry with new solutions for railroading. And so the way we handle that is through the use of standard SO60, part of the administrative standards supplement, and freely accessible through the website. Nope. Let's try to move on. There we go. I did mention MSRP Section J, M1003, the quality assurance specification. In Appendix A of M1003, you'll find a list of activity codes. These activity codes are related to descriptions of what's being done, or the work, the activity that's being performed. It will give the references for the field manual. It will discuss the technical approvals that are required and which specifications you need. So again, another great place to start is by obtaining MSRP Section J, looking through the table of contents, getting Section J, determining, do you need to get approval for an activity code for whatever component or service you might want to be providing, and it'll help you understand where to find some of that information as well. The activity codes are separated by committees. There are 7 technical committees that rely on the M1003 quality assurance standard as part of the technical approval process as well. So it's kind of the foundation. It's the quality assurance program that must be in place to ensure that you're producing quality and reliable parts consistently for supply to the industry. So all of these 7 technical committees rely on the M1003 quality assurance program and work closely with the QA, as well as the MID, which was the mechanical inspection department, to carry out those quality assurance certifications and inspections. However, on the tank car side, it's the BOE that does the facility inspections for the M1002 specification for tank cars. Now, I mentioned that, sorry, just checking time, that for those of you that might have something that doesn't meet that very first question of, will this product be used in North American railroading? We have a program called the QA 5000. And this is an area where often we find international organizations who seek to get into the AAR market, but might not quite be at that stage yet. They begin by becoming compliant to the QA 5000 program. And the QA 5000 program was really set up to fill that gap between the companies that meet that AAR supply threshold and those that don't. But they still might want to be have their facilities evaluated and their quality assurance programs evaluated for compliance. And that way it can be a short step into meeting the requirements of the AAR should you be able to meet that initial threshold for identifying or proving that you plan to sell your product or service into the North American market. So really, there's some differences here. There's no committee involvement. There's no actual AAR approval granted, but there is compliance that is recognized as being very similar in nature to the requirements of M1003. So this slide here is just giving you a bit of an idea of how M1003 quality assurance certification compares to QA 5000 compliance. So it means we look at it to see if the design meets the specifications on the AAR certification side, whereas on the compliance side, you could have some samples that are tested that meet the AAR standards. And in some cases, what will happen is there are a few committees that will review some of the designs and indicate if compliance is met, but they will not grant approval. We see that on wheel sets from international customers. It's one of the areas where it varies a little bit. The only difficulty there is it can really take some time because these committees are very, very busy on the side of approving and maintaining the standards and the products for AAR certification for use in interchange. But you'll see that, many steps in the process are very similar, and how they look at the 24 elements of M1003, looking to understand what's in the quality program and a program like M1003 that is very focused on rail. It's not the same as ISO, and there's no reciprocity between ISO and M1003. M1003, while there might be some things that look similar, but M1003 is solely focused on rail and developed for the railway industry and monitored and overseen by railroaders. So what happens if you have an AAR standard that requires testing and perhaps you don't have those facilities yourself? This is another area where MXV has the capabilities to assist, but really excels, because we are working with the research side of the AAR. We're working alongside of the technical committees, although there isn't an overlap here because we keep things at arm's length as far as certifications and any kind of commercial testings. But if you need to have your product tested, you can come to MXV and have it tested on our test tracks or in our lab testing where we meet the AAR standards for testing. We do a REMA tie testing. Some of these things are done on tracks. We do accelerated fatigue testing and metallurgical analysis and a whole slew of non-destructive testing. And really, this is something that we have to have available because it's part of the service that we are required to ensure is available for the industry to meet the AAR standards. We do have all the test loops and tracks up and running at our new facility. I mentioned that M976 requires certain testing of truck designs for performance, and all of that performance testing can be done on the test tracks that we have in Pueblo. Now, I'm not going into this in detail, but this is really just to let you understand that once you determine what you need to meet on the standards and side, and you work through the approval process with the committees, there is an avenue to work with MXV Rail, to consult with them about your design, to execute on the testing that might be required. And we turn that in, that's part of our commercial group, but we are obviously very experienced in the requirements of the AAR standards and can assist a company with their test plans and making sure that they get all of the results that they need. When I say get all the results, I mean get the appropriate testing done so they can take those results to the AAR committees and hopefully gain approvals. So this is our multi-campus site. Our labs and our headquarters are located over at Pueblo Industrial Park. And then we have our on-track testing. We also have a security and emergency response training center. That is not something I'll go into with you today, but we are always training individuals out there to respond to emergency situation, including emergency on rail. And we have a full derailment mock-up where they're trained and they go out and learn how to address, unfortunately, when things might go wrong in railroading. MXV also has our research side of things where we deploy and carry out the strategic research initiatives of the North American railway industry and the AAR. That is governed by a committee called the Research Committee, and the Research Committee decides which areas they will invest time and money on, and then we put our scientists on those projects and look at the validity perhaps of solutions, look at new technologies that come to the industry, and then they determine, is that something that the industry would like to move forward with? And then that might end up with the technical committees for some sort of rule or standard being written around it. So we have what we call the Strategic Research Initiative Bridge that helps industry go from a product concept to an approved design. And we can do that through our FAST track, which is part of our strategic initiative. FAST is our accelerated service testing track. And this is where we can do all the track performance and temperature testing. We can look at fastener testing if you're working the track side. Bridge deck and track work is on the track. Rail welding and friction control, and ballast degradation and track settlement studies. Now you might say, why are we looking at track when track is not governed by the AAR? But we recognize at the AAR and at MXV that this vehicle rail interaction is key to how we operate our railroads and how we do that in a safe, reliable, and efficient manner. So there's a lot of research that goes on around the track side in conjunction with AREMA. And I only mention that because that might be an area that you're looking to participate in. And we can help step you through that to a certain degree. We just don't govern that through the AAR Technical Committees. One thing that might be of use to you to know is our knowledge interchange. If you go onto our MXV Rails site and you go to the knowledge interchange, you'll have access to our full library of technology digests. And really what that is the results of all that research work that's been done over the years. This is a great resource for perhaps learning more about what's been at the forefront of interest for North American railroading. So I would encourage you to go to the site and take advantage of this and see if there's any subject matter that appeals to you. Now, I mentioned about accessing the standards. There's also a site, AAR.com. That's our site that's governed by MXV. If you go into our MXV Rail site, it'll also take you there eventually, but this is a direct link to our homepage for the AAR Technical Services. And if you go to this page and you click through, you'll see who the committee managers are. There's a summary of how to navigate the approval process, which hopefully should be very similar to what I've just described to you here. It'll also talk to you about our mechanical inspection department. Again, those are our technical inspectors that are out there doing the technical inspections on behalf of the technical committees. And the Bureau of Explosives, which is the BOE auditors for the tank car facilities. A little bit of our frequency coordination because we also coordinate radio frequencies for all of the railroads in North America. So this will be a very good resource for you if you're looking to move into, to understand ways to move into the North American market. Again, the publications link, critical to your understanding of the MSRPs and or the rule books, and that's how you can access them and purchase the sections that you need. And we have opportunities to learn more. We're about to host our joint technical committee meetings. This is a meeting of the Equipment Engineering Committee, the Brake Systems Committee, Castings Committee, and Quality Assurance. They will all meet in Colorado Springs in about a month from now. If you're interested in attending these meetings, some of them have open sessions. Some of them are closed sessions where the committees are talking about business and voting on proprietary information. But if you look at this event link, it'll take you to a website that gives you an oversight of what's happening with the meetings, which sessions are open and closed, and some overview of the individual committee agendas. So if you happen to be in North America in the month of August, there's nothing that you need to do to sign up other than, you know, get a hotel room, and that's also available on the link. We're also hosting the IHHA, the International Heavy Haul Association Conference, and the WCRR. And I know those of you at Birmingham, I believe, hosted that. I think I'm correct that that was hosted in Birmingham last year. So we're very much looking forward to this joint conference in 2025. Just a shout out to that conference because the call for abstracts has opened, and we would encourage you to consider participating in that. It will be held in Colorado Springs, and we will be able to get people onto our site to show you what we have to offer. And of course, there'll be a number of folks there from MXV, including committee managers that might be able to answer any questions that you have, again, about the AAR process. That brings us to the end. And I think that opens the door for questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you. It's filled in many blanks in my knowledge, and I hope for many others too. There's been a few questions, and we'll have a look at those in a moment. But taking you up on your kind bit of PR for us, indeed, we did host the World Conference on Rail Research last time round, and prior to that, it was in Tokyo. We actually hosted it along with the Railway Safety and Standards Board, which is our sort of safety, individual safety board tasked with maintaining safety in the railway and railway systems. And also, while we're getting the questions up and running, and just to allow you to have a quick sneak peek at them, Karen,
Sure.
I'd also like to remind people that also railway interchange is happening next year in May 2025. 20th to the 22nd of May, and that's at the Indiana Convention Center in Indianapolis. So if you're interested in finding out more about how they do and what they do on American railways, be it freight, the majority perhaps of the trade, or passenger, and indeed the infrastructure which has to support both, then think about putting that on your shopping list. That said, there are other events, of course, sponsored by the individual trade associations, and we can put the links in the chat. But they are the Railway Supply Institute, sorry, which is the RSI. REMSA, REMSA, the Railway Engineering Maintenance Suppliers Association, for those of you perhaps with a bias towards infrastructure or track. And then there's the Railway Systems Suppliers Incorporated, which is the RSSI, and also mentioned by Karen as ARIMA, or ARIMA, I think it is, the American Railway Engineering and Maintenance of Way Association. Thank goodness that they thought of an acronym for that, because it's very long. But each of those institutes or trade associations or associations have their own their own events, as well as supporting the big one, railway interchange. There are other large mobility events as well, but we attended the October 2023 one. And we had a mission going out there with ERCI members, a truly international mission. And we, along with Rail S of Saxony and Rail Cluster Southeast Europe and the MAFEX Rail Cluster in Spain, we acted as facilitators for that as well. So it was it really opened our eyes, and just as I would say to anybody, go to Intertrans because it's Europe's largest show, I would also say go to Railway Interchange and any others in the States, because it will also open your eyes. So that being said, let's move on to the questions. Karen, are you ready to answer some questions?
Sure.
Excellent, thank you. So, thank you so much. First one, how does a company know which standards or specifications they must comply with to offer a component in NA interchange?
So, and hopefully I've answered some of that, but just to revisit, I would say that, the best thing to do is to go into the publications website, take a look. Is anybody else getting feedback, or is that just me? I think it's gone. Okay.
No, we're okay. We're okay on sound.
Okay, great. And start to look at which specifications might apply. Now, if you're really not able to, as I said, find something that you think subject matter wise meets the component that you're trying to bring to the market, then you can go to the tech standards. Again, in the table of contents, it'll have that list of folks that you can reach out to. So you could go to the tech standards at it's an abbreviation for tech standards at AAR.com, or EEC at AAR.com is another good one, because again, EEC is overseeing all of the other technical committees for the components that go on to the freight cars. So if you're unsure when you're looking at our sites and looking for hints and clues there, you can always reach out to us, and with a short explanation. Always best to give a little bit of information if you can in an email. If necessary, we could set up a quick call, but we probably prefer to do the initial review via an email. Just a little bit of information for us of what you're trying to accomplish and what you're hoping to do and what you're offering, and then we can point you in the right direction.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Second one down here is, what if a company has a product or new technology that has no defined specification or standard in place? So I'm
And
assuming from that is that's where, the, it's so new that it's, it's not a replacement for existing technology. It's brand new. So what would your answer be to that, please?
yeah, and you're absolutely right, Robert. You hit it on the head. That's where we would recommend you go to the administrative standard supplement and the SO60 specific or standard rather, and that is for the approval process. It'll step you through there some of the things that you need to do in order to put together a request for an approval. And really what that means, again, you'd have to try to define to determine which committee you're probably most aligned with. And as I say, if you're unsure about that, you can just come to the tech standards email address, and then we can help you determine which committee is going to govern it. Because sometimes it will be over at asset health because it's kind of a bit of an overarching system perhaps, or something that's related to wayside but also is sitting on a freight car, and maybe it's doing some monitoring, and it gets to be difficult. You might have to deal with more than one committee in that case, and we see that all the time right now with things like remote monitoring that people want to do, or new technologies for, we're looking at things like parking brakes. I think you've had that in international operations for a while, but we haven't used automatic parking brakes in North America. We don't have a standard for it. Clearly, that one goes to brake systems, or it should be clear that that would go to brake systems committee. But what would you put together? You would put together the information that's outlined in SO60 that basically says, here, I got to state what it is that I have. I need to state what it is I'm trying to prove on how it works. And here's how I'm going to do that. And then you take that to the appropriate committee, and it moves forward from there. We don't want to hold up progress.
Thank you. Thank you. It seemed, before I go on to the next question, it seems that it's really important that you know which committee you target, and that's where your advice would be gold dust, I think, to us European suppliers. So, how does a facility know if they require M1003 QA certification?
Well, some of that should be obvious in the specifications
Mhm.
when you go to read the spec. And I'll be honest with you, we're in a big initiative right now. We have a big initiative called the Audit Quality Task Force, and we are going back and really looking at all of our standards and specifications, shoring up our definitions, making sure we're consistent. I mean, as I showed you, the AAR put together in 1934, I believe it was. So some of these standards have been out
Yeah.
there and maintained for a long time, and we've discovered that we need to do a little more work at getting our approach consistent and make sure that it's clearly stated in a specification or standard what the requirements are. So if you require M1003, it should be clear. Again, a good spot to start is by actually obtaining M1003, because M1003 has that Appendix A that shows you all of the activity codes that require QA certification. Likewise, there are some rules in the field manual that say certain types of work or equipment pertaining to, say, brakes, brake cylinders or something, as an example, will have to come out of an M1003 certified facility. So there's little nuggets and hints all over. And of course, if you're already if you're a component supplier to somebody else as part of their solution, hopefully they'll be able to help guide you as well. But we can certainly, again, try to answer any of those questions that you might have. And a good access on that is to go straight to, I didn't mention this, but we have a qa@aar.com email address, and they'll help you understand that process and the requirements related
Thank
to
you.
the QA.
Thank you. That's clear. Perhaps we could look at the next two questions in one, because the
Yes.
first one is talking about, we hear about freight a lot. are the standards also for the passenger railway? I'm also aware, and I may have got the stats wrong, but roughly 84% of your railway tonnage is freight, and about 16 to 20% is passenger. In Europe, it's the other way around generally.
Yes.
So that's why there might be curiosity about the passenger railway side. And then the second thing, which is about, we did hear it towards the end of your chat there about infrastructure and wayside equipment. So the question was posed before we saw
Sure.
your mention about infrastructure. So just to recover, just to recap. So what about passenger? What about infrastructure? What about signaling? That sort of thing. Other subsystems, please. Thank you.
Well, you really hit the nail on the head, and yes, whoever identified that, hearing a lot about rolling stock, it truly, what we look at for AAR interchange again is things that are operating in interchange and are part of the interchange system, which really means rolling stock, because the track isn't moving. But again, we do recognize the importance of the track and the vehicle interaction. So AAR approvals really do relate to freight rolling stock. However, Amtrak is also a part of that solution. They're passenger railway, obviously. They move on Class 1 tracks. And so there are some standards for wheels and things which they abide to, but we do not write passenger standards over here. We do not govern over passenger specifications as a rule, except for some pieces of equipment, I would say that, are moving on Class 1 rail.
Mm-hmm.
The passenger systems that are the regional passenger, like say the BART, the Bay Area Rapid Transit, they will participate in the voluntary. We have a voluntary M1003 quality assurance certification, and or QA 5000, again, if they're not actually operating in interchange. They will participate in those quality systems because they want them, but they aren't actively operating in interchange, so they don't get AAR certification. Likewise, on some of the track, we don't govern over track. We talked about ARIMA having their standards for track. We do a lot at MXV Rail with respect to research and testing on track, but we do not govern over track. That's left to ARIMA. I'm trying to think, there was a third item I was going to mention. Maybe it was related to passenger. Oh, we're just talking about, you mentioned signaling and other parts of the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Also, signals,
Subsystem, yes.
yeah, not really part of us, but you'll see that with the positive train control, also maybe
Mhm.
recognized as later collision avoidance and things, because the signaling is, so much embedded into a part of that in the communications to the locomotive to make that system work. There are some areas that will touch, but we do not govern over signals as well. However, wayside detection, where we're taking data that is sitting on perhaps an impact detector, or measuring a cold wheel or a hot wheel or a hot bearing, that information is, the information itself is governed by the AAR, because we're taking that data and we're moving that data along with the train and the rolling stock as it moves through interchange. So it's a little muddy, but
Yeah.
largely no to passenger standards, absolutely no
Yeah.
to standards on track.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question is about time, and it's one of those. It's the temptation to say how long's a piece of string is the answer. But I just wonder if you could give us some idea about how much time needs to be taken into account for the approval process for a new vehicle or component intended for your market, please.
Yeah, that is a tough one. I mean, we like to say that, we try to move through the approval process as quickly as we can. So there's a number of things that affect that. One is what happens when the initial application comes in. We can see companies getting stuck sometimes at that point because they haven't provided everything that's required. all of this has to be vetted and reviewed by the technical committees. They meet on a monthly basis. And so if the package comes in and you work with the committee, the committee manager will review it first and try to make sure that what you've got there covers everything that is needed, but they don't ultimately make that decision on their own. So the committee might come back and ask for some additional information. If you can get that design process done, right, that part takes, it being the first step, let's say for your design, that could take probably easily 6 months if everything was perfect, and perhaps more. Then it depends on the requirements for the field trials and how quickly you could meet that. You need to get a certain number out. You have to find somebody to put a conditionally approved component on. So that could take significantly longer, but you'll already be in that process at that point. Another thing is, of course, you have to line up your appropriate facility certifications. Those we do our best to review applications as quickly as possible. That can sometimes, though, take a couple of months, but then as soon as the application's passed, we will schedule an audit within typically a 60-day period.
Okay, thank you. Last question on this slide is for testing procedures, do you use ISO IEC standards or do you have your own basic standards? If I could embellish that a little bit just by making note of what the IRIS standard, the International Railway Industry Standard, which may or may not be appropriate in America. So that's ISO TS Technical Specification 22163. So there's a generic question, and then I've sort of drilled down to 22163 if it's appropriate. Thank you.
Sure. Generally we're following our own standards. However, when we're doing testing and we're looking at performance, we often incorporate by reference other standards, ASME. I'm not going to say so much on the ISO side, really, because that's a little bit more from everything we experience over here on the quality side. And as I mentioned before, we strictly deal in our M1003. But on the testing side, with respect to other standards or specs that we might call out, we potentially could, but largely it's other like ASME, some of the welding certifications and standards here in North America. Again, more addressing North American specifications or our own.
Okay, thank you. And as we were talking about standards, so the next couple of questions are very much aimed at that. The next one is, are there specific accreditations for independent safety assessment companies in the US?
I'm not sure that I can answer that. It's not an accreditation that we offer in our program, but it's a really interesting question. So I'm going to see if I can learn more about that for you, but I'm not sure that I can answer. I certainly know that there's risk evaluation and risk assessments that go on all the time at the railroads, where they pull in their subject matter experts and their operational experts and whatnot. But I don't necessarily see I haven't seen enough of that to be able to say, oh yes, they often pull in this accredited assessment organization, and so I'm not familiar with any accreditations related to that, but it's a good question.
So hopefully what we'll do is we'll complete that offline, and we'll get back to everyone who's attended this briefing. So next one along is, can approval processes obtained in Europe be used or reused or partially reused? We've sort of answered this one, a little bit of this one already, but again, if there's anything else that you can add to it. So in other words, European standards, the IRIS standard springs to mind, but we've already answered that question. But are there any that you're aware of that you might say, oh yes, that one reads across? Or is it a question of almost creating a matrix between what we know as a standard, what you require as a standard, and then finding out the difference?
Yeah, I would say that's probably the best idea, because we don't live necessarily in those standards so much. So for me to be able to to give you guidance. But I would say this, I mean, already performing in some method in rail, while your performance standards very different, your truck's very different, because again, as you mentioned, the majority of what's moving across rail for you is passenger as opposed to freight. But living in the rail environment is automatically going to be a step up. So sometimes when we look at things that are again newer technology or something different than what we have covered in our standards, we obviously look in the environment that it might already be operating in. It could be elsewhere in the world. We see that for folks that go and gain service miles in, say, Australia in on their heavy
Mm.
haul systems and whatnot. So it's all valuable information that could be used in the analysis and the evaluation process. But I can't say off the top of my head that there's anything that completely relates. But having some sort of experience in rail and demonstrating what that is and laying out what that is would
Mm-hmm.
also be a good way to start. And then gaps on your side compared to the standard or gaps in the review process with the committee would also be revealed.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question is, what is ARIMA versus AAR? I did I did sort of talk about ARIMA before, but I'd much rather, and everybody else would much rather, have your explanation and your answer, please, Karen.
Well, REMA is really track and infrastructure. And as I mentioned, while we do a lot of research on that, we don't have governance over it. So they are the track, the infrastructure, the foundation, and we are the rolling stock in interchange is probably the simplest division. Then there's, some things, like I said, in the middle there that are
Yeah.
wayside and whatnot. But that's probably the easiest way to look at it. And ARIMA has their own standards for governance for track and infrastructure.
Thank you. And your test facilities, are they equipped with overhead catenary or third rail?
Not at this moment. We are still, developing, but not at this moment. So I would say, though, if there was something that, you felt um, you were interested in, we also might have the ability to use our expertise and our people and our scientists and our brain power to do something in conjunction with a facility that might have that and still to
Mm-hmm.
help you if it was testing that you required. I would say that, and if I might just, put a plug in for another webinar to do yet now another webinar that would say, all right, we've talked about what you might need to do to get into the AAR and have a discussion perhaps with a little more targeted at what kind of services and what kind of assistance MXV on the commercial side might be able to provide to some of the folks for testing or even
Thank you.
researching on some of their equipment.
Thank you. We be careful what you wish for. We will take you up on that one. But last question, last but not least, AAR Sierra 2056 provides static clearance plates for rolling stock. Is there any AAR specification or MXV advice on roll angle to be considered maximum or dependent on the actual super elevation and speed? Rock and roll motion according to track quality or dynamic outlines? Please.
Geez, well, another one I'm going to get stymied on. I would say we really need to have someone from the EEC. And yes, we do have our clearance plates. I don't believe we go into. I think the railways evaluate some of that themselves with respect to the dynamic movement of the cars and how that might be moving around on those clearance plates. Clearance plates for us are a big deal. Obviously, car designs are changing all the time, and we have to closely watch the adherence to clearance plates because certain parts of the rail can't, has issue with operation. So I do. We do not look at rock and roll, I don't believe. But again, you know what? We could take this one offline and come back with some more guidance for you.
Sure.
I apologize. I can't give you
No,
a
no,
full answer on that.
no, not at all. There's a whole library
There's a
full of
lot. There's all the
information
people.
there.
I'm the one that kind of knows a little bit of everything, but there's the people that know
Yeah,
all the details that you need.
thank you. Right. Well, I think you need a glass of water and a little bit of a little bit of a break. And I'd like to, on behalf of everybody, thank you very much, Karen, for a fascinating tour de force of all things to do with standards, rules, and the approvals process. And we look forward to hearing from you again, but also we look forward to producing more and more information on this, because it's clearly been a very popular webinar. So thank you again from all of us, and I'll hand you all back to Lutz, who's waiting in the wings. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Karen. There was one question left on considering covering and using advanced technologies like IoT, artificial intelligence, blockchain. Maybe you have 2 words on that issue.
My sincere apologies.
And well, honest, I think I saw it there too. I probably should have said something. So, the overall answer is yes. I mean, we're always looking at what's available to move things forward, and of course, much of what we're doing on looking at some of the monitoring systems and trying to understand what that can tell us about health of the overall rolling stock as it's going down the track. That really does include using things in the future, like perhaps AI and IoT, but those are still new areas that would have to have some governance and oversight by even the SOMC level. Remember that I mentioned that very top committee of the safety and operations. They would decidedly be involved in how quickly we move forward into what areas, specifically with respect to some of the newer technologies like that for North American Rail. But we're always looking at moving in that direction. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Karen. And my challenge is now to summarize that webinar and give some information on ERCI activities within 10 minutes. So we will be about 10 minutes of delay. As usual, we have a short feedback questionnaire that we are asking to fill in by each participant. It's about the quality of the presentation, of the organization of that webinar, as well as your suggestions for future topics for next ERCI webinars. Or you are yourself interested in doing a presentation at one of the next ERCI webinars, please let us know. The link is already in the chat. Then talking again about the success project, it was to support the European SMEs of the rail supply industry successfully applying to public procurements in the USA, in Canada, and Norway. The project is finished, but the service is still online. If you are interested in these 3 countries, please contact ERCI. There are some contact persons, Ms. Vescu, Ms. Esperu, and Ms. Carranza Luisaga for USA, Canada, and Norway. You will find all this information also in the chat. Talking about the Innotrans, Robert already mentioned, and we are now 10 of 18 ERCI clusters which are present as exhibitors at the Innotrans in Berlin. And you find here the overview of the positions of the cluster stands. For sure, you will receive that information afterwards in a follow-up email. And for sure, you are kindly invited to visit us. Talking about the ERCI Innovation Awards, Robert already mentioned in the beginning, you are warmly invited to participate in the awarding ceremony. The 3 ERCI Innovation Awards for the best small, medium-sized enterprise, for the best large enterprise, and for the coup de coeur of the jury will be on Thursday, 26th of September, starting from 9 o'clock in the morning in Hall A of the CityCube booth 240. That is the booth of our ERCI member CNA. Yeah, then I will hand over shortly to Irina Vescu. She is also in charge of the eBoost project in order to say something about the new open call for training programs within the eBoost project. Irina.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for this opportunity, Lutz. I would like to say a few words about the open call that is launched within the eBoost project. This call is open for each European SMEs involved in e-mobility sector and also including railways. So what in fact does it mean for SMEs? This is the financial opportunity to receive 3,000 euros to be used for training program. So the company has to select a topic from these three categories, according to their needs. For instance, they want to proceed an internationalization process in the country, or to do a training on project manager or emerging technologies. So they have to choose a topic to fill in a form on the website that here is the link to follow. And as a result, he can benefit of this financial support. We will grant 40 companies, 40 SMEs with this support. Please, all interested companies are invited to participate. The deadline of the call is the end of July. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Irina. There are much more opportunities that companies can get in contact to each other. The B2B matchmaking platform coming from the STARS project is still open until the 30th of September in 2025. And the goal of the STARS project was to match companies of the rail supply industry with solution providers that support them in adopting advanced technologies to improve products, services, manufacturing processes, and organization. If you are interested in these topics or to find a new context from the railway sector, please have a look at these platform. Maybe you will find a good partner for you, and you can still arrange meetings with other platform participants at any time. And the only precondition is to create or update your own profile. So next information is on the recording of ERCI webinars. ERCI webinar will be recorded too, and in a few days it should be uploaded from the YouTube platform of the STARS project. So, handing over the floor to Guido Ankarani, he will say something about that project, which is led by ERCI themselves. It's the first project led by ERCI, and it is called Leader 2030. Guido.
Thank you, Lutz. Yes, few words because we are already out of time about Leader 2030, which is a project for learning for European autonomy to deliver Europe's rail in 2030. In fact, this is the big question. Will we be able to manufacture and deliver what is under the research, development and innovation projects running on the Europe's rail now? So this is why we are studying what is happening. And next slide, please. Yes, we started to explain our difficulty in the railway sector for the future using this example of a pencil. A simple pencil is composed by different raw material like the list that you can see on the right-hand side of the slide. So you can imagine which will be the big difficulty in having the same applied to a complete railway system. Next slide. So from a call of Europe's rail having the keywords supply chain, needs of the future, risk of supply, resilience, and so on, we as ERCI with 3 other partners, we have answered to the call in order to face some of the difficulties that we have already seen up to now, and we can imagine also for the future concerning raw materials and components availability in the future, in order to deliver the system for the railway infrastructure, rolling stock, signaling, telecommunication, and so forth, in order to be sure that we are also able to anticipate and face some of the risk due to geopolitical factors or climate changes. We know already, and we have already seen what happened up to now, so we can imagine and what could be the future, and we try to face those list of risks. Next slide. So for that, we have built a consortium based on a coordinator with ERCI, but as we have already heard, we have 18 clusters which are on the territory all around Europe, able to collect and gain information about which are the problems to be resilient for the future. But for that, we have also 3 other partners, Railenium, which is the technical center of railway in France, based in Valenciennes. We have JKZ in Saxony, which is a cluster on mining, so raw material will be certainly examined and discussed on this project. And the 4th partner is Technopark Istanbul, having a lot of knowledge concerning other modes of transport and other sectors like defense and other, which can bring some information about the scarcity of raw material and electronic components in the future. Next slide. So we started from a study of the past, which arrived up to today, and this has been done in order to identify alerts for the future. And in this moment, we are analyzing the demand side, so examining the research project, the flagship project of Europe's rail, trying to extract information about the need, the demand that will be needed for manufacturing the future projects, product system, and so forth. Then you see the other steps, the other work package of the project, which will be to analyze the supply side in order to see if raw material are available, if the components are available, where they are coming from, which are the risks, and so forth. Then the package 4 is about forecast, and then we will have a final analysis report and recommendation for Europe in order to be informed about risks and how to face them potentially. So we know already from our package 1 about the vulnerability of the European industrial ecosystem in general. Now let's go more in details with what has been done about the current situation, and what is next is especially to define the needs in terms of type of components and raw materials and quantities. Next. So just to summarize and to be informed of what is going on this project, please follow the website link, which is indicated here, and which gives some information about the work we are currently doing. Next. That's all. Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's all. And the link is already in the chat. And I kindly asked you, Guido, to put the following links. Talking about European projects, there is also some opportunities to take part not only in Europe's rail projects, but also in conventional Horizon Europe projects. From the Cluster 5, Climate, Energy and Mobility, there are some interesting calls that might be applied also to the railway sector. These 3 calls here listed into this slide. The application data are the following. The deadline will be on the 5th of September, 17 o'clock, that means 5 p.m. Brussels time, that means Central European Summer Time, and the deadline model is a single stage. Talking about the difference between RIA and EA. RIA is a research and innovation action with a lower TRL level, with a funding rate to be expected up to 100% for all participants, and the innovation actions with a higher expected TRL with funding rates normally up to 70% for companies and up to 100% for scientific institutions. So then coming to the next webinar, you see the next webinar is not in 2 weeks, not in 4 weeks. It's after the summer break. We will have a summer break in Europe, and we will restart some days, about 10 days before the InnoTrans on Wednesday, 11th September 2024, with a cybersecurity topic, data assurance strategies and implications for railways. The registration link is already available, and maybe you will find it to the chat afterwards. I will send it to you in the follow-up email of that webinar. I listed also some other topics that may come for further ERCI webinars on railway international tenders, for instance, on monitoring inspection of rail infrastructure, for instance, on the application of AI in the rail industry, vegetation management of railway tracks, sustainable waste management of track components, and so on. If you have suggestions, please let us know. You could use our short feedback questionnaire. And for today, I have to thank you all for your attention. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Irina. Thank you, Guido. And thank you, Rico, for the organizational issues of that webinar. And have a nice day and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye bye, Lutz. Thank you. Thank everybody. Take care all.